Hi, I'm John Devore. Welcome to the channel. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of hosting my friend Ken Micallef here in my office, Monkey House. Again, some weeks ago, Ken came by to do an interview with me, which he ended up posting in 3 parts, and which was absolutely filled with tons of information. And I realized that, well, I realized 2 things. Number one is the act of this conversation that we were having helped get more information out than what would just sort of normally come out from, me talking to you guys by myself, remembering off the top of my head all the stuff that I wanted to talk about. This whole idea of Ken asking me questions and then me answering them and then him being prompted by more questions based on those answers really just kind of adds a whole new dimension, I think, in my opinion, to what actually ends up being in the video. And I will link to his video interview with me down below. It's great stuff. We cover quite a few topics. But the other thing that occurred to me is that I had never seen any interviews with Ken. Ken has interviewed a great number of far more interesting people than me. And I've never seen anyone actually interview him. Or I've never seen like a sit-down conversation where it was a give and take, where the information that was coming out of Ken was as important or more important than the information that was coming out of the other person on camera. And so yesterday, Ken came by and I interviewed him. And it was fantastic. I got like an hour of footage. And so I'm going to chop that down into 3 videos. The first video is going to be just a little introduction with Ken, and we're just going to talk a little bit about how we each got into HiFi, some of the early HiFi systems that we had. The second video is going to be a dive into the Beatles. And this, for me, is a very interesting topic, especially to talk about with Ken, because Ken is a very pro-Beatles guy, and I was always a take-it-or-leave-it Beatles guy for most of my musical pursuits. And so there's kind of an interesting contrast in that section. And then the final section is going to touch on collecting other types of records, electronica. We talk about jazz a little bit. He's an incredibly knowledgeable person about jazz and jazz vinyl. This is the introduction to all 3 sections. I hope you enjoy the section that is to follow, and thanks for watching. So I was watching one of your videos. It was the video where you're talking about the Let It Be reissue. These days, most of the comments I get on my videos are very positive. I get very few, other than just weird spam. But there are a few videos that stand out as attracting astoundingly virulent hostility.
On your channel?
Yeah, on my channel.
I get
And the biggest one by far was the video I did when Rolling Stone magazine changed their 100 most important albums of all time. And it went from having something like 5 of the top 10 were Beatles albums or something crazy like that, to 1 of the top 10 being Beatles, and the top album of all time going from some Beatles record to Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On.
Right.
And so I reviewed it, and I did, it was a little bit of a clickbait headline. It was, of all, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, yeah, right.
But I just talked about the fact, I wanted to use it as a platform to talk about the album because I absolutely adore the album.
It's a great record.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about how astonishing it was that Rolling Stone changed so much. And so one of the things, we're actually not that far apart in age, but but you represent the young part of the boomer generation, and I represent the old part of Gen X.
Huh.
And I think there's something more significant than just the stupid titles in that. And a lot of that revolves around the Beatles. Because in that record you talk about your love for the Beatles and how important they are for music, but also for you personally.
Right.
And for me, I've always known people for whom the Beatles were the most important thing there ever was. And I never really got it. For me, growing up, Beatles were already old. They were already kind of has-beens. Yeah, early on I was listening to like Zeppelin, Stevie Wonder, and you know, that was the stuff that was at the forefront for me growing up. Mm-hmm. And then like Police and Pretenders and stuff like that, you know, moving forward into the 80s. But listening to you talk about the Beatles, also the Ringo thing. You know, for me, John Bonham was the greatest rock drummer of all time. But of course, Ringo predates Bonham significantly. Not maybe in years, but certainly in the evolution of rock as music. You know, because by the time Bonham hits the scene, Ringo has already done all of the changing of the way rock drums are going to happen. Yeah,
that's a good point.
But I never really, I always was like, oh, well, they didn't even think he was the best drummer in the Beatles. And I know that's a fake quote, but you convinced me otherwise. Just listening to you talk about Ringo over the years, not just in that one video, over the years, and then really listening to his playing completely changed my mind. I'm like, wow, it's like, first of all, very innovative. It's not just the basic sort of modified jazz drumming that most of those dudes were doing at that time. He was doing something different, and he was kind of creating drumming that wasn't jazz drumming made into rock drumming. It was rock drumming new. And so yeah, I totally get that. But yeah, so this is me talking while I'm interviewing you. So sorry about that.
No, that's all right. And my response to that would be, I mean, seeing all 6 hours, I've already watched it twice, of the Get Back thing on Disney Plus. Mm-hmm. That's another revelation to see Ringo. You know, Peter Jackson restored all that footage. It looks incredible, but mm-hmm. You can sort of see the evolution of Ringo's parts. Even though 1 minute on the song Get Back, he's playing 2 and 4, then he's suddenly playing the triplets. They don't explain how that happens. Right. But you get to see his parts up close, and he's still amazing. You can see him starting with the left hand. You know, he was left-handed on a right-handed kit, which was part of the reason he had all these bizarre fills. Right. His fills that are really hard for people who are regular right-handed people. They really are. So hard. Like, what is he starting on? Yeah. You have to really rethink it. Yeah. But to see him playing those. And even on the roof, he's so strong and solid. Right. And they sort of take him for granted because he is so strong and solid. And also, I think because he didn't, like, I feel like mostly John, but certainly also Paul, they felt like they had stuff that everyone needed to hear. Like, it's like they were bursting with stuff that needed to get out there. Yeah. And clearly, the music that came out of the Beatles proved that they were right to a certain extent, yes. And I think Ringo was just like, he wasn't that kind of a person. He wasn't like, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to try to keep these guys from going off the rails. I think more than anything else. And he was probably maybe the most important Beatle for doing that, because I feel like without his kind of stability and foundation, they may not have made it all the way to the end there. If you hear the old, pre-Pete Best, then you hear Ringo, it's like the difference between, a straw man and a physical, fully amazing being. I mean, Pete Best was a horrible drummer. That's what I got rid of him. He was miserable. And Ringo swings so hard. Even on those really early Beatle tracks, he's really swinging. Right. And they did all grow up hearing jazz, but... Well, the swinging, the early Beatles is much more like early rock. It hadn't evolved yet, for sure. Right. But Ringo had played, he played in Butlin's summer camp, where he was in a dance band. Right. Have you seen the new Get Back? Have you watched it? No, I haven't. Oh, you got to watch it. Yeah, I probably will. I've been resisting, but why? Because I'm not a Beatles guy. Right. I'm not. I would say then it might bore you. But to see that's my fear. On the roof, it's amazing. I would like to see it. And also, I'm fascinated because they are such important and like they're deities. So when you just see them hanging around shooting the shit, it's kind of cool to see. I think I'm still old enough, I'm in my 50s, so I'm still old enough to admire them as these beings above everyone else. Because when I was growing up, they were still the people. Definitely more when I was growing up. Led Zeppelin was touring on a 747, and that was the most badass thing in my world. But they were still deities. They were still,
bigger than Jesus, right?
Yeah, they were,
right? And
right.
so yeah, I probably will see it. I don't think my wife is going to see it, and my son probably has no interest. My son loves Octopus's Garden, but beyond that.
They show the entire making of that. You know, Paul telling Mal, bring in an anvil, and Mal's happy to play bang, bang on the anvil.
This
and
silver hammer.
And you do see occasionally McCartney giving Ringo direction. He is sort of controlling, but it's interesting. Mac Randall, one of my former editors at Musician Magazine, he's my editor at Jazz Times now, had a lot of insight. And if you've seen the video, you'll see this. He said McCartney was so controlling, he thought, and you see it in the video, because he was trying to save John Lennon, because they were best friends. Because in Twickenham, Lennon is almost mute. He almost says nothing. He's just like there. But when they get Billy Preston and when they move to Savile Row, everything entirely changes.
Right.
And I think anybody, big Beatle fan or not, can see that change. And then you wonder, well, why did they release that first movie to make it look so horrible? Because they're obviously having a blast. And the day they closed the end of the movie, the next day they start recording Abbey Road.
Right.
So it's a great thing. But you know, I see Ringo along with Hal Blaine as the first studio drummer. He had to come up with all these parts for this incredibly diverse, you know, array of songs.
Right.
And if you look at his part in Rain or in...
well, really, I mean, incredibly, like the Beatles' body of work as a whole, especially considering the amount of, how many years, it wasn't that many years.
Like 6 or 7 years,
yeah. It is incredibly diverse. More diverse than anything, really.
Yeah, it really is. And it's also surprising, in the Get Back video, Ringo he doesn't say a word. He just sits there and listens.
Right.
Which is kind of like, you know, I've seen video of Steve Gadd in the studio, and he just sits there and listens. You know, they don't say
the drummers
play that.
A lot.
I'll just, you know, play that again, and you can see Ringo's brain working. But a lot of his early parts, as you'll see in the video, are very primitive compared to what they became. But that was true for all of them working through those songs.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there's one, and I won't go on about it, but there's one amazing scene where they're waiting for Lennon to show up, and McCartney's just riffing on his bass, and he's writing Get Back in the moment. So you see him like coming up with the chorus, and it's really amazing. That guy had
a moment of downtime.
Oh, it's just incredible.
Out comes the song.
And Harrison and Ringo were just sort of sitting there listening, and you see him basically create the song in front of your eyes. It's pretty remarkable. But if you're not a real Beatle freak, as I've seen people commenting on Facebook, it could, 6 hours.
It's long, yeah.
It's pretty long.
It's a deep dive. Yeah, I don't know. It's a big commitment. So I will probably
if you can get past the first, if you watch the first one, you go, well, this is horrible.
So maybe, do I even have to watch the first one? The first one is basically them suffering in the soundstage.
The first one is basically the original Let It Be movie, which I saw in the theaters.
Right.
And it's just horrible. And Lindsay Hogg trying to direct them or tell them what we're going to do. Well, let's go play in an amphitheater in Greece, or let's go to Turkey and set up. And they're like, I don't think so. That's not going to happen. But the second one, Billy Preston comes by accident to say hi. And they said, well, we need a keyboard player. And as soon as he sits down, bam, the thing just takes off. And Lennon wakes up, and it's really something. It's just, I would skip the first one, go straight to the second one. And plus, the video has been beautifully restored, because originally it's shot on 16 millimeter. It was for a TV special.
Right. Thanks for watching part 2 of my conversation with Ken Micallef, in which 2 middle-aged guys debate the Beatles. It is what it is. I'm pretty sure I've got enough footage to come up with a third video, because we do touch a lot on jazz and electronica on vinyl, which is very interesting. I just need to figure out if I can cut it all together. But most likely there will be. So thanks very much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.